I never thought something as simple as renting a room in my mom's house would turn into a mess. But here we are. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be writing about how my own mother kicked me out of the house, I would have laughed in your face. No way, not me. We've always been close. Well, at least I thought we were. I'm 25, and I've been living with my mom ever since I graduated college. I guess you could say I'm one of those late bloomers who didn't really get on their feet right away. It wasn't that I couldn't find a job, but more like I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. So living with her seemed like the easiest option. I had my own space, paid rent like I was supposed to, and helped out around the house when needed. Honestly, it was comfortable, peaceful even. That all changed when my mom's friend, let's call her Tanya, moved in. I never thought much of Tanya at first. She was just this lady who'd come over for coffee every once in a while. But the whole dynamic shifted when she and her kids needed a place to stay for a few months. A few months turned into, well, it's been over a year now. Tanya's kids, who were supposed to be out of the house after just a couple of weeks, never really left. At first, it wasn't that bad. The kids were annoying, sure, but they weren't the worst. But as time went on, things started to feel crowded, and I didn't mind sharing the space when it was just me and my mom. But now there were these random kids wandering through my room. Tanya and her kids would barge in unannounced, acting like it was no big deal, like we were one big happy family. It started out small, like them grabbing my snacks or leaving their stuff in the living room where I worked. But it slowly grew into something more. I'd be sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a project, and the next thing I knew, Tanya's youngest would be standing in the doorway, staring at me like I was supposed to entertain them. But the worst part? My mom, the woman I'd spent my whole life feeling close to, didn't seem to care. She'd laugh it off like it was all normal. "Oh, they're just kids," she'd say, while I was literally losing my mind over how uncomfortable I was in my own home. No boundaries, no respect for my space. But here's where the real tension starts. I've been paying rent and living here for years, and I have every right to the privacy and peace that comes with it. But when I tried to talk to my mom about how it was starting to feel like their house and not my home anymore, she just brushed me off. "You're being too sensitive," she'd say. "They're family." And that's when the resentment started building up. Not just because of the kids and Tanya, but because my mom wasn't standing up for me. She wasn't protecting me. She wasn't protecting us. The tension between us grew day by day, and I felt like I was living in someone else's house. Every little thing started irritating me. The noise, the mess, the constant feeling of being watched. But I couldn't shake the guilt. This was my mom, my family, and I didn't want to start a fight. I thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe things would go back to normal once they left. But weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, I was just trapped. And that's when everything started to unravel. I thought things would get better with time. I really did. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more suffocating the whole situation became. The space in the house felt smaller every day, like the walls were closing in on me. And no matter how many times I tried to tell myself that I was overreacting, that I was just going through a rough patch, it didn't help. The reality of the situation never changed. They were still there, Tanya and her kids. I remember one evening about 2 months ago, I'd just gotten home after a long day at work. I was exhausted, mentally drained. I had plans to relax, unwind, maybe read, or watch a few episodes of a show. I was really looking forward to it. I walked into the living room, and of course, there they were. Tanya sitting on the couch with her youngest daughter, both of them giggling over something on her phone. The older son was sprawled on the floor, headphones in, playing video games, and I felt like I was intruding in my own home. They didn't even glance up when I walked in, like I was just another piece of furniture in the room. I tried to keep it together. I smiled, greeted them, and even asked if they needed anything. But my mom, she was in the kitchen cooking dinner, completely oblivious to the weight of the situation. She didn't even look up when I said hello. I couldn't do it anymore. I'd reached my limit. "Mom," I said as calmly as I could, "can we talk for a minute?" She barely looked at me. "What is it, honey?" "I'm making dinner." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "We need to talk about Tanya and the kids. This is getting out of hand. I don't have any privacy anymore. They're always in my space, and it feels like I'm just living here, not actually living here. For the first time in a while, my mom paused. She looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "What do you mean living here?" she asked, her voice softer but still laced with confusion. "I mean, Mom, this isn't my home anymore. It's like I don't even exist here unless it's to help out with something or keep the peace. I pay rent, I follow the rules, and I don't even get basic respect for my own space." My mom blinked, taking in what I said. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked over to me, but there was no understanding in her eyes, only frustration. "You're being dramatic," she said, her voice sharp now. "I told you they're family. It's not a big deal. You're being selfish." I felt the sting of those words, the same words I'd heard 100 times over the last few months. "Selfish?" I echoed, incredulous. "You don't think I've been patient with this? I've been trying to be understanding, but I'm at my breaking point." She crossed her arms and gave me that look, the one that said, "You should be grateful for what you have. You're living here because you don't have anywhere else to go. If you're that unhappy, then maybe you should think about moving out. I'm not going to kick Tanya and the kids out just because you're feeling uncomfortable. They're here to stay, and that's that." I didn't know what to say. I was so hurt, so angry. It was like she didn't even care about how I felt. The whole situation hit me like a ton of bricks. "Fine," I said, my voice trembling. "If that's what you want, then maybe I will move out." It was a rash thing to say, and in hindsight maybe I didn't mean it entirely. But in that moment I was done. Done with trying to please her. Done with feeling invisible in my own home. And I guess, deep down, I was hoping that my mom would see the seriousness in my words. Maybe if I left, she'd realize what she was doing to me. But it didn't happen that way. She just looked at me, disappointed, and walked back into the kitchen like our conversation never even happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying everything in my head. How had we gotten here? How did my mom become someone I couldn't talk to anymore? I thought about moving out for real, but the truth was, I didn't know where I'd go. I didn't have the savings yet to be on my own. And the thought of leaving everything I knew, including my mom's house, it scared me. But the thing was, I couldn't stay either. Not like this. Not if I wanted to keep my sanity. The days that followed were weird. My mom and I hardly spoke aside from the occasional hello in passing. The tension was unbearable, and I was starting to feel like I was living in a house full of strangers. Tanya's kids, who had become so comfortable in my space that they treated it like their own, kept pushing boundaries. And my mom? Well, she didn't do anything about it. I don't even think she noticed. But then came the night I found something that changed everything. It was a random Thursday when I stumbled upon my mom's journal in her room. I wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. I was just looking for something in her drawer when I spotted it. I hadn't seen it before, so out of curiosity I opened it. At first it seemed harmless, just typical mom stuff. But then I came across a few entries that made my stomach churn. In one of the later entries, she wrote about how she felt torn between me and Tanya, how Tanya's kids were so needy, and how she felt guilty for not giving them more of her time. But there was more, a lot more. My mom had been secretly offering financial support to Tanya, paying for bills and even sending her money without telling me. And it wasn't just that. I read another entry where she admitted that part of the reason she let Tanya stay was because she was afraid of being alone, afraid of being judged by her friends, afraid of me growing up and moving on, leaving her all alone in the house. That hurt, not just because she hadn't told me, but because it made me realize that her actions weren't about taking care of me. They were about her own fear. Suddenly, everything made sense. The tension, the excuses, the way she kept brushing me off. It wasn't just about Tanya and her kids. It was about my mom's own insecurities and fears. She was afraid of losing control, afraid of being alone, and I had no idea how to fix it. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd read in my mom's journal. It didn't just explain her behavior. It made me angry. How could she not see the damage she was causing? How could she not understand what it was doing to me? The whole situation felt like a betrayal. My mom was the one person I'd always trusted, and yet here she was, choosing to ignore my feelings in favor of her own fear and guilt. And Tanya, well, Tanya was just taking advantage of the situation, acting like my mom's house was her own personal refuge. I spent the next few days stewing in silence. I didn't bring it up to her. I didn't know how to. How could I confront her about something so raw, so personal, and not feel like I was betraying her in return? But I couldn't just pretend everything was fine anymore. I needed to talk to her, needed to say everything I'd been holding in. So I decided I would confront her, no more running away from the issue. It was another quiet evening when I finally gathered the courage. My mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner again, as usual. Tanya and her kids were in the living room, loud as always. But I didn't care. I was done holding back. I walked into the kitchen, and without waiting for her to notice, I slammed the journal down on the counter. The sharp sound of it hitting the surface echoed through the room. She froze, her hands still on the chopping board, and turned slowly to face me. "What's this?" she asked, her voice flat, but I could see the hint of fear in her eyes. I crossed my arms and looked her dead in the eye. "I know about the money, about Tanya, about everything." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The kitchen felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. My mom's face went pale. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then closed it, unable to find the words. I pushed on. "You've been secretly paying Tanya's bills? You've been letting her kids walk all over me, invade my space, and you've just sat there acting like nothing's wrong. And worst of all, you haven't even bothered to talk to me about any of it. You've just let it happen, like I don't even matter. Well, guess what? I do matter. I've been living here, paying rent, and you've been treating me like I'm the problem." Her face twisted with a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "You don't understand, Katie. I was just trying to help Tanya. She's going through a tough time, and I didn't want to be alone. I didn't know what else to do." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "What about your daughter? Don't you think I deserve some consideration too? Or do I only matter when it's convenient for you? I'm not just here to pay rent and keep quiet while you do whatever you want with your life. I'm not your backup plan." My mom's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, as if she was seeing me for the first time in a long time. I didn't know if I should feel relieved for finally saying everything I'd been bottling up, or if I should feel more hurt than ever. It was like this wall had been built between us, and no matter how many times I tried to knock it down, she just kept rebuilding it. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just about Tanya anymore. This was about my relationship with my mom, and it was broken. Tanya's voice interrupted the silence, calling from the living room, but neither of us reacted. We were too far gone now. My mom finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to push you away, Katie. I just didn't know how to fix everything. And now it feels like it's too late." I stared at her, the weight of the years of silence crashing down on me. "It might be," I said, my words sharp. "I don't know if I can keep living like this. I don't know if I can keep living for you, Mom. You've been so focused on keeping everything together for everyone else that you forgot about me. You forgot about us." I turned away before she could say anything more, walking out of the kitchen and back to my room. I didn't know what I wanted from her at that moment. I didn't know if I wanted her to apologize or if I just needed space. I didn't know anything anymore. All I knew was that things had changed forever, and no matter how much I wanted to pretend it wasn't true, I couldn't ignore it. I spent the next few days in my room, not really talking to anyone. My mom would knock occasionally, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The emotional hangover from our conversation was too much to handle. I felt torn between wanting to fix things with her and wanting to protect myself from more disappointment. Every time I thought about her, I felt this aching emptiness in my chest. She wasn't just my mom anymore. She was a stranger, and I was a stranger to her too. Tanya, unsurprisingly, kept her distance after the confrontation. She never came to my room anymore, and when she did talk to me, it was always in a forced, awkward tone. She must have realized that things were shifting, but she didn't care. She never did. One night, my mom came into my room, finally breaking the silence. She stood there for a long time, her figure outlined in the doorway. "Katie," she began, her voice raw, I'm sorry. I should have done better by you. I've been so selfish, and I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. I didn't look up at her. I couldn't. I don't know if you can fix it," I said quietly. I don't know if I can fix us." There was a long pause, and then I heard her sigh. She didn't push me further, though. Instead, she just said, "I love you, Katie, no matter what." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Love felt different now. The kind of love that doesn't listen, doesn't see, and isn't willing to change. It's not the love I wanted. And yet I knew that even if I wanted to move on, even if I wanted to let go of the pain, I couldn't. It was there, like a shadow I couldn't escape. As I lay there that night, I realized that some wounds just don't heal. And sometimes you have to let go of people you love, even when it feels like the hardest thing in the world. I wasn't sure what the future held for my relationship with my mom, but I knew I had to start thinking about what was best for me. For the first time in months, I finally felt a sliver of peace. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I was no longer going to let myself be invisible. And that was a start story too. My parents picked my brother, the golden kid, above me. And when they found out my girlfriend was spying on me for them, I severed my relationship with them 6 months ago. To give you some background, I'm a 28-year-old man who recently abandoned my real estate career to focus on my own company. I've always wanted to construct something of my own, and I believe that now is the ideal moment to begin the process. I resigned from my job a few months ago and made the decision to give this my all. About 6 months ago, I made up my mind and had enough money saved up. I could definitely use my parents' assistance and knowledge, so I urged them to invest in the business. Given that my dad and his brother still run their auto dealership, they come from a business family. I think I could accomplish it with their assistance because my mom is their accountant. My biggest error, in my opinion, was having this conversation with them during a family meal that also included my younger brother. He is currently 25 years old and has worked in sales for a few years. But he has always had a lot of ambition. Several weeks later, he told us that he wanted my parents to invest in his new venture, which he also intended to launch. He wasn't kidding, despite what I assumed. He said that I had motivated him to take on this challenge and that he was so serious about it that he had even resigned his job and given notice. Although I was somewhat irritated, I made an effort to ignore it because it didn't seem like his choice would have any impact on me. It wasn't until a few weeks after my brother's revelation that I realized I was mistaken about it at another meal. According to my parents, they could only invest in one of us, and if they had to choose one of us to wager on, it would be my brother. Interestingly, they informed me that, like me, he wanted to begin working in the real estate industry, despite the fact that he knew nothing about it and had never shown any interest in learning about it until I declared my intention to launch my own company. My parents' announcement that they would not be funding my business and would instead gamble on my brother infuriated me. I waited to speak to them since I was still processing the unpleasant news. When my brother made the decision to attempt to comfort me, it ended up being really patronizing. He assured me that I didn't have to worry, and that although it wouldn't be an equal relationship, I could join him if I so desired. At the very least, he wanted me to have something. That, in my opinion, was a terrible thing to say to me, particularly at a time when I was still struggling to accept that my parents preferred my brother over me. Even though I had always known it in my heart, it still stung to be reminded of it and to know that my beliefs were correct. I lost my temper at my brother's remarks and got into a heated argument with him, accusing him of attempting to steal my ideas because he didn't have any of his own. I advised him to get a personality that didn't center around me and branded him a copycat. I mentioned a few instances from our time together in school when he would continuously attempt to emulate me and outshine me at my own game, but he would always fall short. I informed him that he needed to be ready for it since it will also happen to him this time. My brother also became irate, understandably so, and informed me that it wasn't his fault that our parents chose him over me because it was obvious that they did so because he was just superior. My parents attempted to diffuse the rather immature and petty relationship by stating that they loved us equally, but they simply felt that my brother was more business savvy than I was. They even implied that I should accompany him, as though I would. My brother attended business school, but I had worked as a real estate agent, so I had real-world experience and understood what I was doing. I couldn't understand why he didn't know what he was talking about and didn't have any of the expertise I did. Without even giving me a chance, my parents would presume that he would be more skilled than me in this area. There was only one explanation. They had a favorite, and I could see that they had one, but it wasn't me. There was no more escaping the fact that the brother was the golden kid. After that day, I made the decision to cut off all communication with my family because I found it extremely offensive to be treated as though I were a complete moron. Not good. 6 months have passed since I last communicated with them. After I left that day, my parents made a few attempts to contact me, but they gave up when I didn't respond. I haven't really been to any family gatherings in a few weeks, and I have also stayed to myself throughout the holidays since I don't want to run into them anyplace, because I know it will be unpleasant for everyone. Avoiding everything is the wisest course of action. I just haven't had any contact with them, and I really like it that way. But 2 weeks ago, I learned something that truly took me by surprise. I was going on a weekend vacation with my long-term partner of nearly 3 years. I was intending to pop the question to her on a little romantic retreat. A few hours after we arrived, she made the decision to take a shower. I intended to charge my phone while she was in there, but I couldn't locate mine and assumed I had left it at home, so I opted to borrow hers. When I picked up her phone, which was charging, I saw that she had gotten many SMS from my dad, whose contacts she had saved by name. It was surprising because, given that I had lost touch with my parents, I couldn't fathom any talk she would need to have with them. Additionally, I broke our rigorous no snooping rules for that one time, and I'm quite happy I did. Since she had changed her password and I no longer knew the right one, I had to guess it. Fortunately, I was able to figure it out on the second attempt. They are quite close, and it was her sister's birthday. After reading the messages, I discovered that they had been communicating for a number of months. I discovered that the majority of the items she would provide were images of my business plan, a list of potential investors, potential sites, and a few other secret business-related papers. My girlfriend knew about it too. I wasn't shocked that she had gotten her hands on those documents because I normally work from our living room and she had easy access to them. The fact that she was sending such items to the last individuals I would desire, however, completely startled me. I had no doubt that my father would take advantage of this to assist my brother surpass me. After all my girlfriends sent him, I also understood why she was betraying me. She would attest that she had gotten the money after my dad would designate a certain amount and let her know it had been sent. Therefore, she was literally selling me out, and when I recognized what was happening, I was outraged. In reality, she was spying on me for my parents in return for cash. Furthermore, the company I was starting involved more than just photos of papers and documents. She would also share additional details about me with him, like whom. The worst part was that she would come clean if I spoke negatively about them or my brother, even to her, based on the family I met and the things I told my relatives about them. She would be compensated for everything. To put things in perspective, my partner works as a freelance writer. After quitting her steady employment, she made the decision to go it alone. A few months after we first started dating, as I had promised to help her until she could support herself, she lived with me. Therefore, I was still paying her rent because that hadn't happened yet. I didn't understand why she was prepared to sell me out and ruin our relationship because she wanted the money so badly. While she attempted to save what little she made on her own, I just continued working non-stop and paid for everything without once asking her to help with any costs. She had never felt guilty about it because of me. It was amazing that she didn't even borrow money from me for personal expenses. However, that only illustrates her level of independence. I would say that I was mostly responsible for her having a place to live and food to eat each day. I'm not boasting about it at all. It is simply a reality. She went out of her way to defraud me in order to get some more money, which was pretty much crazy and reminiscent of a poorly produced movie or something. When I saw it, I became highly upset and decided in an instant to leave. I gathered everything I had and headed to the hotel parking lot before unpacking any of my bags. As fast as I could, after loading everything into the car, I headed home. I waited until I was well away from the hotel before taking a break or checking my phone. I finally pulled over at a petrol station after nearly 2 hours of driving because I was feeling queasy and wanted a can of Coke. When I eventually checked my phone, I saw that my girlfriend had sent me far too many SMS and approximately 10 missed calls. She kept asking me if something was wrong since she was worried about where I was. She claimed to be quite concerned. She went so far as to admit that she had no idea what was wrong. However, if I was experiencing any difficulties, I should just return and speak with her so that we could resolve the matter. I suppose she was unaware that I had told my parents about her snooping on me. I simply stopped everything, took a pause, and gave everything some thought since I had no idea what to say to her. The revelation that my long-term girlfriend had been spying on me for my parents appalled me. I was experiencing betrayal, hurt, anger, and sadness all at once. However, after giving it some thought, I made the decision that I would not allow these individuals to overcome me and flee. I was going to make their lives really difficult. I had a plan, so I turned around and drove back in the direction of the motel. She looked really pleased to see me when I got back to the hotel room. Now that I knew the truth, though, I had to try my hardest to act like nothing was wrong. I pretended to be okay, even though I was disgusted by her. I explained to her that the reason I had been absent for so long was because I was preparing something for her, and I briefly freaked out in the midst. I had to take a break and relax as a result. She appeared perplexed until I got down on one knee and told her that I was no longer afraid, and that what truly made sense to me was the idea of living out the rest of my days with her. I realize now that I was doing appropriately. It simply made me think about how crazy it is, because even though she had been stabbed me in the back the entire time, she was still more than willing to marry me. She was so thrilled and accepted right away. I then informed her that I had had enough of our argument and wanted to get back in touch with my parents to tell them the news. In order to test how she would respond, I informed her that I didn't want to be married without my family being there. I felt that it would be best for both of us to just put the argument behind us. What I said appeared to turn her off a little, but she quickly got over it. She told me she thought it was a terrific idea and urged me to try to patch things up with them as soon as possible. As soon as we were engaged, I texted them and she notified her family about us. They didn't respond for a day, but the next day of our vacation, my father texted me to let me know that he was pleased that I had decided to make up and apologize to them, and that they would be delighted to rejoin me. After finishing that, I immediately got to work planning the engagement party. To ensure that she wouldn't interfere, I told my girlfriend that I would handle all of the planning alone, since I wanted it to be a surprise for her. I engaged a buddy of mine who works as an event coordinator. I invited everyone my girlfriend and I knew, including her family and friends, to the party I threw at my place. Even though it took a lot of effort, I was able to keep everything a secret from her until the very last. And on the day of the celebration, I absolutely caught her and my family off guard. I made a speech and offered a toast to our partnership once all of our guests had arrived. Initially, I praised her and my family for everything they had done for me. After that, I made the big surprise and informed everyone that I was aware of their activities over the previous few months. I took care to make the speech as embarrassing as I could. I called my parents even harsher insults, and I called my girlfriend a sellout. However, I thought my brother was the main culprit behind all of this, so I saved my best comments for him. I told him it was sort of sad that not even his own parents believed in him, even if he now had access to all of my business ideas. Despite being the golden kid, he truly didn't succeed since he still needed my help to get there. I wanted to make sure that everyone in our life knew that they were all pitiful. I had enough time to prepare everything for the party, which was held a week after I learned of my girlfriend's small agreement with my family. It was also simple to get screenshots of my girlfriend's text exchanges with my father from her phone. I only needed to enter her phone covertly while she was sleeping and erase all the evidence now that I knew her password. After the lecture, I had booklets created from the screenshots I had gathered and gave them to each visitor separately. All of our visitors were in disbelief, which just served to highlight how cowardly and insane everyone involved was. However, my girlfriend and my family were the most surprised. In fact, she sobbed as she exited the room and wouldn't leave until everyone had left. After the pamphlets were distributed, everyone essentially left. But my relatives remained and made an effort to oppose me. I refused to put up with it and told them that it would be better for them if they left, because if they didn't go, I would call the police, and this would become much more ugly than what was required. Then they disappeared. They most likely feared it would be difficult to maintain their dignity in front of their family, who had heard everything, if this turned out to be even more repulsive. They didn't want any more difficulty since they knew this would be the talk of the town in the coming days. I had to speak with my girlfriend that same evening, but I didn't hear from my parents again. She left after the party and has since returned to live with her parents, but not before accusing me of being a terrible person for putting her through that. She explained to me that she was only acting in that way because she needed the money to pay for her younger sister's schooling. Her sister was still in high school since she was going to enter medical school a few months after graduating. That checked out then. When I questioned her about why she didn't simply ask for my money, she said that she was too proud to do so. She didn't give it much thought and just accepted my father's offer to pay her money in return for information on my business and other transactions. My father reportedly told her that he wanted to know about this because he wanted to assist me with the business, but he had no other option and had to take these methods because I wouldn't talk to him. Even though she was aware of the issues we had been facing and acknowledged that she had been really foolish to not consider this, she didn't even consider the possibility that he may be utilizing all that information to assist my brother. Instead, however, she then reversed it and claimed that although what she had done was terrible, what I had done was also really insane. She eventually realized that I had been aware of her activities since the day of our proposal, and she advised me to have ended our relationship that day, rather than returning after driving away to embarrass her and my parents in front of so many people. The fact that we would no longer be together was already certain. She was going to inform my father that she could no longer spy on me for them, and she was going to call it quits after our engagement. So she was happy that I had revealed her my true colors before she departed. Before she went. That was our final talk. I haven't talked to anyone or done anything but go to work and return home since the evening of our engagement celebration. The party and embarrassing them didn't make me feel better about anything, despite my expectation that it would. She was right when she said that I appeared worse in this situation, and I regret what I did since it was truly rather insane. I remain in order to embarrass my girlfriend by giving her a party. One update. Hello everyone, this will be a little update. My ex and I split up 2 weeks ago, and she returned today to pick up a few items she had left behind. She pretended that I wasn't there the entire time, which was hurtful but well earned. We didn't speak to one another at all. I embarrassed her in front of her parents and all of her friends after she did something completely irrational that destroyed my trust for the rest of my life. We can just call it even, so I suppose it's okay now. I don't think there's anything I can do right now to help it, but it will continue to ache for some time. I definitely don't have to apologize to her. Therefore, I want to thank you all for your assistance and guidance. At least I feel better about my parents now, so I suppose it worked. I think it's better that they haven't spoken to me yet. It's terrible that they already have all of my company ideas and plans, but there isn't much I can do to improve the situation. Since the harm has already been done. My brother is human garbage, so it seems doubtful that he will use any of it. But the most I can hope for is that he does the right thing. Furthermore, I doubt he will want to hold back given the way I made fun of him at my party. At least in terms of my business, things are looking quite dismal for me right now, but I'm hoping that I can overcome it somehow. The second update. Hello everyone. The previous post was about a month ago, and today I finally started a new business venture. Although I am aware that starting a new business takes time, I am already very eager to work and pursue my passions. The hours and preparation I put into this have finally paid off and produced something. This implies that I have something to distract myself from my former partner. Even though I am aware that she wronged me, I still miss her and our enjoyable moments together. I'm currently attempting to analyze my thoughts about everything in general and work through all the trauma in therapy. Although it's challenging, I feel like things will start to improve for me now that I have my work to look forward to. There is still no word on my brother's whereabouts, but if I was able to launch my company before him, I have an advantage. Therefore, I must take full use of it I quote M, crossing my fingers. The third update. I recently found out that my brother is relocating his company to another location, since he no longer wants to compete with us, which is why my family is moving. He told me everything in a lengthy email, so I got this straight from the source. He took care to express his regret that I was not emotionally stable enough to handle my feelings like any other normal, sensible adult, and that he believed it was okay to host parties and make fun of other people simply because I struggled with confrontation. He said that despite the fact that I lacked any attributes that would support it, I simply wanted to be the focus of attention for once. However, he hoped that I would avoid him and our parents and wished me well. Now that over 3 months have passed since the engagement party night, I believe I'm really starting to cope with it and absorb things much more effectively than I did at the time. So that's fantastic. Additionally, I was informed that my girlfriend was out and about as normal and was finally going on dates with other people. I suppose that everyone is moving on, including me. My business is going well, and I will eventually get back to normal. Story 3. After 10 years of quiet after the birth of my baby, my dad wants to get back in touch. He refused to help me and funded my cousin's college tuition and fees. I am a 28-year-old man who has been married to my wife, Haley, a 28-year-old woman, for a few years. A few months ago, we had our first child, a son. My relatives saw the pictures we shared of him on Facebook a few weeks ago and decided to send them to my dad. So I suppose it was a big mistake. I haven't spoken to my father in about a decade. After he declined to cover my college expenses, he fully paid for my cousin's education. The man didn't even ask for it, which made it the funniest. My dad didn't have to ask, he simply did it. Although I was aware of my dad's constant desire to support his sibling, I felt that this was going a bit too far. To put things in perspective, my cousin and I were born a few months apart at around the same time. Despite the fact that my cousin Peter wasn't my biological sibling, we always had a strange sibling rivalry going on in which we vied for my dad's love. My dad was a single parent after my mother divorced him when I was only a few months old because she wasn't prepared to be a mother. Although Peter's parents were there, they were both too preoccupied with their jobs to give him much attention, which is likely why he was pursuing my dad. My uncle and his wife owned their own cafe, and my dad was the head of sales at a company. Sadly, their cafe company wasn't doing well, so they were always in need of my father's financial assistance. My dad was able to support them since he was in a good profession. It never troubled me, and I didn't give a damn since I didn't think that my dad may one day pick them above his own family. Although Peter and I got comparable marks in high school, he lagged somewhat behind me due to a few instances in which he failed his math homework. Therefore, I would say that I had taken control by the end of the year. I was quite pleased with myself until it backfired. My father informed me that he would not cover my college expenses and that I would need to seek for a scholarship. However, he was happy to cover Peter's entire tuition because it seemed that he needed the assistance more because his parents were having financial difficulties. My dad and I had a lot of arguments over it, but he was unchangeable and told me that I needed to have heart and consider my brother. I informed my father that because we were not even biologically related, he was not my brother. He became irate and warned me that I would be better off moving out and living alone if I continued to use such foul words. I was already furious with my father for picking Peter over me and failing to cover my college expenses. Without giving it much thought, I left the house and spent the following several weeks living with some of my friends. Despite my father's repeated attempts to persuade me to return home, I never spoke to him again. However, Dad never once offered to cover my college expenses. I did attempt to apply for a student loan or something, but I was unable to do so since I had no people watching out for me, and I was forced to leave college after a few days because I was unable to make any payments. I could find employment, but regrettably, no job would allow me to attend lessons and pay enough. For me, it was simply a really bad moment. However, I somehow found a very low-paying temporary position at a firm, and I put in a ton of labor since I had to pay for groceries, rent, and a few other expenses. I knew that my housemates would not be amicable if I didn't pay them on time, and I had no one to turn to for assistance. As a result, I had to climb without assistance. Fortunately, though, I was fortunate to have good fortune and my efforts paid off. as I currently have a much higher job at the same firm. I wouldn't say it was all negative for me because I met my wife through this place a few years ago, and we even had a son together. It seems like everything has worked out very nicely. Despite the fact that I didn't attend college and live the life I believed I was entitled to. I don't resent it now, since I believe that my hard work is what made me who I am, even if I had to work much harder than most people my age back then. Really, I have no regrets. Although I am aware that Peter works for a company and has a family of his own, I don't believe he makes as much money as I do, which must be unfair to him. Even though he is the one with a college degree, a few acquaintances have informed me that they have seen his home and lifestyle and that it is not as good as mine. When I discovered that he wasn't living as well as I was rather pleased of myself. I considered calling my dad to find out his thoughts, but I refrained from doing so since I didn't want to come off as spiteful. In the end, even though the odds were stacked against me, I won and he lost, and that was plenty for me. I could prove anything without speaking to one of them. However, my dad made many attempts to get in touch with me and mend our relationship throughout the years. He would wish me a happy birthday, Christmas, and New Year's every year. I waited for him to apologize only once, so I never responded, but I also never blocked him. The strangest thing about him, and my main grievance with him, was that despite his attempts to communicate, he never expressed regret for his actions. Despite the fact that I was his only son and his flesh and blood, he didn't even consider what he had done to be wrong, and felt that his preference for Peter over me was entirely fair. For this reason, even when he showed his disappointment at not being invited to my wedding, I never answered any of it. I felt a bit awful when he texted me to say that he wanted Haley and I to be happy forever and to bless us. I stopped feeling sorry for him, though, when I realized that he had still not apologized, as it was clear that he had never felt sorry for me. At least not to apologize. Even after that, he kept trying to text me, but I didn't reply. It was strange that he didn't call. He could have tried, but I suppose it was just too much for him. That changed a few weeks ago, though, when my kid was born, and we shared a Facebook status about him. Following we had not spoken for over a decade, my father suddenly called me following that post. I didn't know what to anticipate, but I answered the phone. I suppose I secretly hoped he would at last confess his wrongdoing to me, if only so he could see his grandchild instead. But even then, he didn't offer an apology or even mention what had transpired all those years prior, which upset me once again. I got married without him, and now I had a son, but he won't even be able to meet his grandchild, he told me over the phone, and he was really sad. My father expressed his heartbreak to me and said he hoped I would move on from everything that had occurred and stop making such a big deal out of it, as I had done for the previous decade. In a case like that, when he had decided to pay my cousin's college tuition instead of mine, I'm not sure how it was reasonable to argue that I was making a big deal out of nothing. This forced me to basically drop out and start again from the bottom. If I hadn't had to leave college, I would have had a big edge, but he took it away from me, and it wasn't even like I was a poor student. I was a fairly excellent student, but not good enough to get a scholarship, and certainly not so awful that he gave up on me and chose Peter instead. As a complete idiot, I had been expecting for an apology, but instead I lost my temper and told my dad that I regretted not banning him and even returning his call for the last 10 years. That apology was never going to happen, and I now see that he didn't regret his conduct, which is a prerequisite for an apology. He attempted to argue with me about it, accusing me of being unfair, which was absurd coming from someone who didn't even understand the definition of fair. I angrily informed him that, based on the way he treated us, Peter was unquestionably his eldest son, and I was most likely his second. And I suppose I went a bit too far with that, since I implied that Peter was the result of my dad's unexplained preference because he and my aunt had an affair. I continued, telling him to quit wasting my time and go speak to his other kid. I hung up on him after that. I believe it was a mistake since my aunt texted me after that to say that what I had said was unacceptable rather than my father. She informed me that she wasn't even participating in this and that she didn't like being purposefully drawn into it by me in order to harm my father. All three of them seemed to have been wounded by what I had said, and they wanted me to apologize since it really went too far. The main reason I haven't responded to her SMS yet is that I'm at a loss for words. Sincerely, comma. I don't even know why my father felt compelled to inform them about it in the first place. I was talking to him in private about this. Whatever I had said was an outburst of rage, and there was no need to implicate others. However, I was speaking to him at the time, and I didn't intend for it to offend or reach other people. My aunt was the only one who was essentially impartial and treated Peter and me equally when we were children. So I feel bad about hurting her, even if I don't really care about how my dad or uncle feel. She didn't compare us all the time and was kind to me. Even though it was her own son, she could have easily pitted us against each other like everyone else used to do. She was genuinely a kind person, and I feel foolish for causing her pain. Additionally, I believe that my remarks about Peter being my dad's son were personal, and that I shouldn't have brought her up. My wife didn't take sides when I brought it up to her, but she did think my remarks were a little hurtful, particularly considering that my aunt had been the only one who had been good to me as a child. I feel like I should apologize, but I firmly believe that my father, not me, is mostly to blame for this, since he opened his big fat mouth when he didn't have to. I apologize for referring to my cousin as the other son of my father. Update 1. I eventually replied to her after nearly a week of not answering the text, since I was at a loss for words. Yes, comma. I did apologize for my remarks. I told her that I was saddened by my father's actions, and that I didn't want to offend her, but the words simply came out. It was also something I uttered out of rage. However, I didn't mean to harm her or my uncle. I added that I didn't believe my father would make the effort to tell them what I had said. Although I was attempting to be discreet, I wanted my dad to know that I held him accountable as well, because I wasn't solely responsible for the circumstance. Additionally, I was certain that my aunt would inform my father and uncle about my apologies, so if he was intelligent enough to understand what I meant, he would undoubtedly find out. It was, in Haley's opinion, the ideal non-apology for my father, and the ideal apology for my aunt. To be honest, he should have known how I felt about him and what he did. Therefore, he didn't deserve an apology nonetheless. It won't change the facts, no matter how much he tries to minimize it and make it appear as little and unimportant as he wants. He was simply a monstrous guy since he chose Peter over me, made me leave college, and never expressed regret for it. I thus owe him no apologies. I don't really have much to do with my uncle, even while I was living with my father. We weren't really close. My uncle used to set Peter and I against one another, but when it came down to it, he was just as strange and avoidant as my father. At least my aunt was kind to me. Thus, they are both free to be as hurt as they choose. I'm not going to apologize to them, therefore it doesn't matter to me. I only apologize to the one person to whom I truly thought I owed an apology. Even if she rejects my apologies, I won't say anything further to anybody. I'll accept it as I've fulfilled my responsibility. She may now decide whether or not to accept it. Update 2. After 3 days, my aunt responded to my apologies today. I had all but given up on her answering. Even though she stated she didn't mind, my father and her husband still thought I should apologize because what I had said was offensive to them as well. I made it very clear to her that I didn't care about my father's or uncle's feelings, therefore that wasn't going to happen. The situation was quite tit for tat. I don't care about their feelings since they don't care about mine. She was kind to me as a child, which is the only reason I even apologized to her. They weren't. I thus don't think I should apologize to them. I learned from my father that we shouldn't apologize, especially when we don't feel sorry for the other person. I was simply following him, so I didn't feel the need to apologize. After becoming a bit irritated, my aunt informed me that I couldn't act in this manner around people and expect them to not be upset with me. To be honest, I don't give a damn whether they're upset with me, and that seemed rather obvious to me. So I reiterated to her that I didn't give a shit, I did my part. Furthermore, as they are not now my top priority, I will not take any further action. My wife and my son are all that matter to me at the moment. Therefore, people are free to scream all they want about it, but I won't be impacted. She was typing some more, and I could tell she wasn't interested in continuing the fight. Thus, I blocked her. Haley believes that this is the end, and I hope so. but I know they will do all in their power to capitalize on it and make a big deal out of it. Update 3. I suppose my suspicion was correct, and I'm not sure if I'm pleased or disappointed. Peter wrote a lengthy post on his Facebook page about what I had said, accusing me of insulting his parents because I was envious of my father's preference for him. I believe I was quite explicit about my issues with him from the start, so I don't see why he felt it would be a big, stunning surprise. I assume almost all of our friends were aware of our rivalry, and I never concealed my jealousy, so he wasn't actually doing what he believed he was doing with that post. He made it known in public that he wanted me to apologize to his mother, his father, and my father, his uncle. I nearly typed up a paragraph to remark and explain what was actually happening since it was so absurd. However, I changed my mind at the last second, retracted my whole statement, and chose to remain silent since I didn't think the drama was worth it. I was aware that this was just what they desired from me. They asked me to talk to them and leave a comment on that post. As a result, even though my father was the one who initially provoked me, the drama would intensify and I would somehow wind up appearing to be the villain. Therefore, I made sure they had no chance to make a bigger deal out of almost nothing by not replying to the message at all. Haley believes I have the right idea, since it will only become worse if I comment on that post and other things. Since I apologized and took the necessary action, I really don't need to explain myself. However, as long as they don't include me, they are free to carry on playing the victim even after that. Consequently, I blocked Peter. Furthermore, since we don't actually have many friends in common, it makes no difference what he writes about me since those who know me and my background will not evaluate me based on his post because they are aware of the reality. To be honest, it's all that counts to me. Here is a little update. In fact, my tactic of not replying to his message worked and he removed it. The fact that my friends, who were aware of the reality, commented on that post and advised him to remove it unless he wanted them to share my side of the story, which wouldn't look good for them, must have also been helpful. That may have scared him a little because he wanted to maintain the spotless image that my dad, his brother, and my aunt had created of themselves at my expense. He removed the post, but not before sending each of my pals a private note warning them that they will be remembered negatively for this. That is too theatrical, I must admit, because I seriously doubt that our small dispute will ever make it into history. Therefore, he didn't need to send my pals private messages saying such strange things. I'm ashamed that I'm linked to this family because they're all crazy, and I'm nearly ashamed for him. It would have been rather odd if he had continued to publish it, and I hadn't even replied. So I'm simply relieved that he's no longer revealing personal information in public. Since I don't want to speak with them again, or hear about some new prank they perpetrated. I'm genuinely just crossing my fingers that they will move on from this. As I already stated, I truly want to spend time with my wife and son, and I am not in the mood for their pointless and superfluous showmanship. The 5th update. The previous update was about a month ago. I want to start by saying how much I appreciate you reading my story and getting in touch with me to provide words of encouragement and best wishes for my family. The fact that individuals who don't even know us are supporting us makes Haley and I really happy. Therefore, we are thankful to each and every one of you. It's rather heartwarming, and I'm glad I shared it here when I was first struggling with what to do. In any case, what transpired? A few days ago, my uncle sent me an email that really caught me off guard because of the absolutely crazy things it included. Since our relationship didn't exactly end well, I was initially just surprised that he had gotten in touch with me at all. Haley advised that I at least read the email as, if they were contacting me after all this time, they must have something significant to say. I nearly didn't even open it. I opened that email because I believed she had a point. And I still haven't fully processed what I read. First things first. I was correct about my aunt and father having that affair, and it turns out that Peter is my dad's biological son. I detest that I was correct since it implies that Peter and I are biologically related, which is repulsive. I just had the fact that we weren't biological siblings, at least. However, I suppose we are at least half siblings, and I will never be able to dispute that at this point. Let's talk about how my uncle learned. My dad was at the point where he was telling my aunt about the thing that I said about Peter being his other son, and since my uncle had overheard part of that conversation anyway, My dad had to repeat it, and he was acting very strange about the fact that he had, apparently, tried to discuss what I'd said with my aunt in private when he had gone over to their house all those weeks ago while my uncle was at the cafe. Entire situation, which is what caused my uncle to get alarmed. He also started to suspect his wife. When they both were a bit too upset over what I had said and exaggerated it totally, my uncle became even more suspicious. He knew that my words were angry and that I didn't mean anything, but he was led to believe differently by his brothers and wife's reactions. In actuality, their own actions were what exposed their cover. He believed that they were exaggerating, and when they requested Peter to write that despite my apologies, he realized that something was very strange and that he wanted to find out more. However, he was aware that my father would never even consider this, and he didn't want to take the chance of discussing it with his wife in case he was mistaken. He took the first action that came to him and called my mother to see if she had any information. He took some time to find her, but a few weeks ago he did, and she gave him her word on the matter. When Mom learned of my father's adultery, she just used it as an excuse to leave, telling him that she wasn't ready to become a mother anyhow. It also clarified how she avoided paying the sizable settlement sum and child support. However, because it had been a while, she did come clean to him. Finally, the truth has come to light. In his extremely passive-aggressive email, my uncle told me everything about it and praised me for being a jerk, which is how he eventually discovered his wife was cheating. Thus, they are now divorcing. Peter has broken off all communication with them, and my dad no longer speaks to any of them. He went on to say that he hoped I was at last content. And gentlemen, do you know what? Yes, I am. At last I am content.
Story 2. It's time to raise a chair. We've got another great story for today in the Aurora Lounge. Nothing says new job and a fresh start like putting a stateside restraining order between you and the family drama. Today in the lounge, Opie's sister has a more vivid imagination than a sci-fi writer on caffeine. I spent the day with my sister's best friend, and now she's telling my parents that I'm a homewrecker. So this all started yesterday when I, 22 female, had a date planned with a guy he ended up not showing, and so naturally I texted the group chat about it. My sister is in this particular group chat. I'm guessing my sister Sarah, 26 female, told her best friend Jay choice of a male about it because a few minutes later, Jay texted me to ask if I'm okay. I told him yes. Just a little disappointed since I was pretty excited to try that particular restaurant. He said that he would pick me up at noon the next day so we could go eat there. I told him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted, so I agreed, thinking nothing of it. Well, today he took me out as promised, and while we were reading, Sarah FaceTimed J. When he didn't answer, she called again and again. He answered the fourth call and asked her what was going on. She said that she was just checking up on us and told me to call her later. Later ended up being almost 8. Jay and I ended up spending the rest of the day together hunting down some collectible dolls we both like and trying different dessert spots along the way. On the way back to my apartment, Jay asked me to change the music on his phone. When I opened it, I saw that my sister had called him about 30 times throughout the day and texted him across multiple different apps. Jay put his phone on Do Not Disturb after lunch, so it made sense why he didn't see all those notifications. Once he dropped me off, I called my sister and asked her if everything was all right. She said yes and asked if I had forgotten to call her back sooner. I told her that I was out with Jay, so I didn't get the chance, and figured it could wait since she didn't call me. She hung up, and a few minutes later I got a call from my mom. She sounded angry and told me that I should be ashamed of myself. I said sure, but why today? According to my mom, Sarah called her in tears, saying that she had caught Jay and I having sex in her apartment. I'm so confused. I told my mom that I did not, in fact, have sex with Jay, and then I didn't even know where they lived together. I asked her to give me a minute, and I called Jay, but he didn't answer. So now I'm here, laying on my floor, wondering what the hell is going on and putting off another conversation with my mom. Let's get some relevant comments from the community. Let's start. So your sister thinks she is in a romantic relationship with her best friend. Her best friend does not have feelings for her and doesn't even know he is in a relationship with your sister. Oh boy, you got yourself a delusional sister. Best of luck with that one. OP replies. This is pretty on brand for her, so I'm used to it. He isn't, though. The next person says, Wait a minute, are your sister and Jay dating, or are they strictly friends with no benefits? 30 missed calls and an unknown amount of texts over the course of a few hours. It's crazy to lie to your mom about something that never happened is delusional. Follow up with Jay to make sure he's okay. Your behavior is quite disturbing and borderline obsessive, the AP replies. Yep, strictly friends. Jay, call me back. He's fine, but he's not staying in his place tonight. The AP responds on not knowing her sister had a roommate, but it's not Jay. I'm not really sure how to make this clearer, which is bad because I'm a teacher. I knew my sister had a roommate that wasn't Jay. That's why when my mom said their apartment, I told her that I didn't know they lived together. As for him having my number, he's my friend too, Of course he has my number. I'm glad you don't take everything at face value. You're doing better than my parents. Also, I know I'm horrible at expressing things, much more so when I'm worried, so I don't mind clarifying. It quote, "S astonishing how Sarah managed to invent a whole love drama in her imagination and then summon the whole family to report on a fictitious scandal. Maybe she should consider writing books. She certainly has a gift for fiction. In the meantime, Jay deserves a medal for his phone's perseverance through those 30 missed calls." Update number 1 3 days later. So I'm not religious or anything like that, but Jesus Christ. Thank you everyone for your warm words and support. I don't know what to do with myself. Also, I planned to post an update yesterday, but my buddy invited me to go watch the Michael O'Hara movie with her, and then I just forgot. Sorry about that. I wanted to clear up any misconceptions before the update on my initial post. When my mom told me that Sarah and Jay shared an apartment. I claimed to be unaware that they shared a residence. Those are my precise comments to her because last I heard, Sarah had a roommate and Jay lived alone. I was right. That remains the case. I apologize for not being explicit about that. Sometimes I have trouble expressing myself. People were also curious as to how Jay learned about my date, or lack thereof. And he claims that as he was chatting with several of his friends, including my sister, she casually mentioned it to him. In addition, some people are questioning why, given that I knew my sister liked Jay, I went out with him. I had no idea. My sister doesn't necessarily talk to me the same way just because I spoke to her. I know from experience that my sister is a jealous person, so if I had known, I would have discussed it with her beforehand. In any case, yesterday night was amazing. Jay gave me a call back. He said that because he would feel safer with company, he would be staying at a friend's house. I asked him if he and my sister had ever had a romantic relationship. He said that the only problem was that since she felt excluded, he kissed her at midnight during a New Year's celebration. Of course, I am unable to verify whether it is the sole thing. He said that he didn't even discuss living with Sarah, so he's not sure why she would claim that they were living together. I contacted my mother once more after talking to Jay. She still sounds like a pinch, but this time I can hear my dad shouting for us to get over here and my sister sobbing in the background. Presumably we're Jay and me. As I had informed my mother, I did not possess Jays. Additionally, I disliked driving at night. I informed them that I would go the next morning. I also had more time to collect any proof I could to establish my innocence. In order to demonstrate that he and Sarah do not share a residence, Jay even forwarded me a copy of his lease. Jay works, so I visited my folks by myself. My parents began screaming at me as soon as I got there. They never anticipated this from me. Only the typical insulting things I did. To you and your sister, how dare you? You are aware that she is already struggling. Why complicate her life? I was even dubbed a whore by my father. It was enjoyable. I sat there and calculated how much quicker I could complete my graduate program and leave the country, or at least a state. I didn't pay much attention until my mother informed me that I would have to provide for Sarah until she got another job if I caused her to lose hers. At that point, I lost my temper and informed them that if they believed I would do that, they were as naive as my sister who missed a day of work due to a tantrum over a non-existent incident. Would I cause her to lose her job? Sarah had been skipping work, according to my dad, to make sure Jay wasn't leaving early to visit me. I discovered that they had been giving her rent money for months after my sister informed them that Jay was missing a lot of work and wasn't taking home enough to pay the expenses. I informed them that this was untrue and showed them the lease adjacent, which prominently displays the date the lease began and its expiration date, along with his address, which differs from Sarah's. After bringing Sarah out of the room where she had presumably been all along, Mama demanded an explanation from her. According to Sarah, he most likely moved into that other apartment to be nearer to me on his alleged business trips. Jay is a software developer to start. I'm not sure what kind of business travels he would take. Second, since Jay's flat is about an hour distant from mine, I discover that my sister is unaware of my residence. My parents began to trust me once I showed them that on Google Maps. Sarah broke down in tears and accused me of lying. Even if what I said was accurate, my father told me that I shouldn't have been so harsh with Sarah and that, as her sister, I should be supporting her at difficult times like this. I informed him that although I was not a therapist, I would assist her if she ever made the decision to seek treatment. Then I went out. I didn't have anything else to say, and waiting for an apology seemed pointless. My father seemed uneasy. My mother didn't see me leave since she was too busy comforting my sister. Since then, I haven't spoken to them. If you were hoping for a phone update in which I exacted revenge on my sister or whatever, I apologize. Petty and insane. I quote, LL probably respond if you have any queries. However, I appreciate your concern. And those of you who responded to my initial post with your own tales. I'm very sorry I had to go through that. Let quote, S now get more feedback from the community. Is your father really not sorry for calling you a whore? I'm sorry that simply by hanging out, you and Jay are having to deal with this. It looks like your family is terrible. I hope you conveyed that to Jay. However, it appears that she is pursuing him. The OP answered. After everything, I told you everything. He said that he would attempt to obtain a restraining order. Another person adds their voice. Did you realize your sister was the star kid from the beginning? Did you prepare your proof for that reason? You were so ready for self-defense. You've done it a lot, it appears. Edit. Furthermore, your parents don't care about the person who began harassing a man outside of his house. Has there ever been any repercussions for your sister? The sole response is, I'm not accustomed to being taken seriously. Thus, yes, that is why I was ready. I have no idea what's going on with my parents at the moment. Since then, I have not spoken to them. My sister's collision with the family automobile was the only instance in which I witnessed my parents get upset with her. She has, therefore, experienced at least one consequence. It is possible that your sister is trying out for the part of the obsessive character who mixes reality with her own twisted dreams in the next psychological thriller. Well done for making it through that ridiculous marathon. Your father is calling you a lovely whore. He is obviously not fulfilling his potential as a motivating speaker. Additionally, your mother was so engrossed in Sarah's crocodile tears that she failed to notice you leaving the house. That quote, S family of the year material. However, you were well prepared. Bringing evidence into a knife fight was akin to bringing a nuclear weapon. Hard truths and Sarah's response. Traditional. She has advanced to the CSI fictitious crimes section, the top tier of investigative work, with her delusions. And good for Jay for attempting to obtain a restraining order. The man's desire for calm is understandable. Perhaps advise him to get a new phone plan that includes limitless do not disturb mode. A year later, update 2. I'm not sure how to begin, but after everyone sent me an update, I felt compelled to write one. So much support and love. When I logged back in, I noticed a few questions I had seen when writing. I'll start by responding to those. My sister was subject to a permanent restraining order against Jay. He now has that after several months, and much more harassment. I couldn't tell you why my sister was lying to her parents to get money. I'm fairly certain that she lied in order to avoid disappointing them, but I'm not sure where all the money was going. In summary, my sister broke into my house and violated the restraining order, which led to her arrest. When I failed to save her, my parents were very upset with me. She's had 3 jobs since my last post, and they blame me for her arrest and termination. I haven't spoken to either my mother or my sister since. I only got a call from my dad saying Happy New Year. In addition, I completed my master's degree, and after numerous job applications and rejections, I was able to secure employment in my field. One big plus is that it's far from where I currently reside. I'm thrilled to begin this new chapter in my life, even though I'm sad to be leaving my friends. Overall, I believe my mental state has improved significantly since I started writing my post. I believe that my plan to use writing as a journaling tool didn't really work out. I therefore discovered various ways to communicate and think about my emotions and circumstances. I believe I will continue to use my account, but most likely only for insignificant purposes that should receive little attention. It quote s classic when your parents blame you for getting arrested. You have the audacity to ignore your sister's developing criminal career. The next thing you know, you'll be accused of failing to assist her in her plans to break into the jail. Your dad at least managed to wish you a happy new year despite his reluctance. On the plus side, perhaps he'll work up to a full sentence next year. Congratulations, Major, on completing your master's degree and finding employment in your field. Relocating is undoubtedly advantageous. Reduced likelihood of sporadic home invasions by siblings who are estranged. Do you have a comparable tale? Tell us in the comments section below. We're also sorry if you do. We appreciate your presence in New Orleans today. To ensure you don't miss our next video, please press the notification bell, like, and subscribe. I quote LL. See you shortly. Additionally, remember to return your chair to its original location.